So I think there'll be more kind of complete and specific thank yous coming later, but I just want to start by thanking all the organizers, all the people who are involved in producing this meeting. It takes a ton of work, and it's been an amazing few days. So as Shreya said, we're here to kind of present some new initiatives here at the foundation. But before doing so, I kind of wanted to provide you with a little bit of history. I don't know, is this going to come up? Nope. There you go. Look at my, I don't know what's going on here. Let's try that again. Okay. An intrepid group of sentinels came here to Lisbon, now, 17 years ago. Here's an early photo of a faculty retreat with some faces you might recognize. We've got a somewhat shaggy Carlos Ribeiro there, and I can say that because I was even more shaggy at the time. And you know, we were attracted here by our founding director, Zach Mainin, because of, I think, a common trait we all shared, which is that there was an opportunity here to do things a little bit differently, to take advantage of the kind of unique circumstances of being at a foundation in Portugal, a little bit off the beaten track, but still very connected because of all the networks of the people who got recruited. And because of early leadership, starting with Zach and then later Rui Costa and Marta Moita, you know, we were always kind of pushed to kind of think about not just the science we were producing, but the process of how we do science and the people we were interacting with and what we were kind of training them to do as human beings, not just scientists. And during those years, you know, we built up together with many other people, administrators, platform staff, foundation administration, you know, a number of different programs, you know, research programs, graduate programs, this symposium, and the fruit of all that labor was really an incredible amount of, I think, cultural, scientific, and infrastructural capital, and the focus in the early days, really for good reason, I think, was squarely on fundamental neuroscience research. Okay, and Zach, I think, was very smart to kind of focus on a uniting core interest, which was behavior across a number of different model organisms and different questions. But I think the argument at the time, even though, as you heard from Leonor Bleza on the first day, the Foundation's mission is to do applied research in some sense. Zach's argument was always, well, we have so much to learn about the brain that we're not really ready yet to make that jump. But nonetheless, you know, we do exist in this particular context, and so in time, after we had kind of solidified this amazing research program that I thought I'd be here for 5 years and then go back to the US, and now I'm here 17 years later because of all the amazing things we built together. You know, I think we were pushed to start thinking about how can we go further in terms of our science. And of course, you know, that often involves, when you're a fundamental researcher, thinking a little bit more about how the fundamental knowledge you generate can be applied towards problems of practical importance, right? And then, of course, with applied research, right, you often gain the ability to develop tools which help you solve problems, right? And then we're in a cybernetics conference, so I need to have some loops in here, right? These developments, of course, feed back onto each other, right, in order to enable future kind of curiosity-driven science, and so on. And, you know, over the past few days, I think we've really been touching on things that span this spectrum, from fundamental science to more applied science, to, you know, the development of tools and even products, right? And so this area of neurocybernetics and this meeting, I think, comes at a really interesting time for us because of what we're about to introduce, which involves, as a sort of core interface activity, activities like the ones we've been talking about for the last few days. So things that we sometimes refer to as virtual neuroscience, synthetic neuroscience, neuro-AI, neurorobotics, neurofoundation models, and so on. Okay, and I don't think it's hyperbolic to say this represents, in our domain, really the kind of pipeline for human progress when it's working well, right? If you can set up these kinds of elements and get them interacting with each other in fruitful ways and cross-pollinating and so on, okay? Now, as I already alluded to, our mission here, as stated in the will of the founder, Antonio Champalimaud, is to actually do scientific research in the field of medicine. So when I took over from Zach and Rui and later Marta Moita and as the director of the neuroscience program, I was asked to think about how would we connect the kind of systems, circuit, computational neuroscience behavior that we do here to problems of clinical importance, right? And that's when I started talking a lot to this guy over here who started coming here many years ago as a visiting scientist in the summers, I think invited first by Rui Costa, and that has led to what he's going to tell you about next.
Thanks, Joe. I usually hate conferences, but I really loved this one. And I'm trying to think why, and it just turns out that I think I loved this conference because it's very much exactly mapping onto what we're going to try and do here. Because if you think about it, this conference, thank you Memming and the organizers, it was great, and I wasn't even going to be here, so I'm so glad I stayed. Is that it had everything, right? Different animal models, stuff that was more fundamental, technology, clinical application, and others. I've never seen a mix like this at a meeting before. And why was it? And I think in a way is because there was a unifying idea, which was the cybernetics idea. Now, if you know, that term was introduced in 1948 by Norbert Wiener. So we have a conference right now that is heading towards a century-old idea. And I think that's really important because when it comes to science and ideas versus technology, they're different. Technology is what's called synchronic. You have to be up to date. If you're a scientist or an engineer, you need to use the latest technology. And if you're not up to date, what's the point? Whereas science and ideas are slow and diachronic. Going back to 1948 is actually a good idea because there's a timelessness to things like control, information, feedback loops. So what made this conference so good, I think, is it combined ideas that are slow with technology that is fast, right? And combined them in a way that can lead to real progress, both in fundamental science, like Joe's talking about, and in clinical work. And so, in a way, what we really want and are trying to build here is a sort of permanent version of this conference, right? So in other words, you can have it every day, right? And so what we're trying to do under this more, rubric of brain research and repair is essentially, obviously, the fundamental work that has been so successful here that we've just heard about. And then what I want to really focus on is sort of in this sandwich is this neurotech warehouse, which is going to be a place where all the engineers and the basic scientists and the clinicians can all play together to do the kind of stuff that, was in the end, with Chris's talk, he could have written an advertisement for what we're trying to do here with what he showed, right? It was kind of extraordinary. And then, so that's the neurotech warehouse. Then there's going to be a neuroscience of disease program, which is new, where there's more human-level, research in neuroscience, but of course, by no means only humans. We'll also be doing neurobiology of disease, like we've heard about too. And then a clinic where we can try and apply it, just like we heard from Chris, right? So you want to sort of build the tools, do the AI, build the electrodes, try it out in animal models, play in the warehouse, and then go and do, like these N of 10 phase 2 trials that Helen, the remarkable Helen Mayberg, has done going back to 2003, 2004, 2005, and onwards. So in other words, I think we really feel like there's an ecosystem that has been built that has gone from left to right, building on what the neuroscience program was, have a space to play with the technology, have all the stakeholders there, have research being done now in human populations in the disease space as well, and then obviously have a clinic where we can try out the technologies, implement new ones, partner in companies, have startups, and then actually offer these as treatments. And so what you can see here are examples. So this is a little montage. So on the left, one thing that's happening, we heard about simulation and digital twins, but Joe's trying to spearhead a project on robotic twins, in other words, synthetic neuroscience, where you sort of build from the bottom up to try and get a hierarchical view, in this case, of sensory motor control. This is sort of the immersive room that we're building. This is the mothership immersive room, but we have smaller ones, and this is where people can start to have closed loop feedback between movement and motion capture and animation, where they're directly connected. So the better your movements, the more beautiful the feedback you get. And we're already starting, pilots in patients. And then that's the warehouse itself. This is when it looked more like a giant aircraft carrier, sort of a fish warehouse. It's actually, if you go and look at it now, it's been split in two, and we're the nicer one to the right. Please, if you haven't gone to see it, you can go visit. But that's basically the idea, that we want to take what this conference, I think, epitomized with all the different types of expertise, try and actually lock it in place in an actual building and a program, and try and have this go in a way that I haven't seen. I've been around, and there aren't places that usually manage to bring all these different things together in one place. And so we hope to sort of do that here at the Technology Warehouse, the Digital Therapeutics Clinic, the basic program, and the new Neuroscience and Disease program. And I'll stop there. Thanks very much.